Hello there and welcome again. My name is Ponjul Zwelder and I'm your geography teacher. Today we'll be talking about catchment and river management. Okay, so why is it important to manage our rivers? Now, it is important to manage our drainage basins and our catchment areas and rivers and drainage basins and all of that for the following reasons. Number one, we know that 70% of the earth is water, but we also know that only about 2% or less is fresh water that is fit for human use. And rivers form most of that. So if we do not manage, it means that we would be losing more and more freshwater sources. And so freshwater is only sourced from rivers as well, and from dams and lakes and groundwater. So we have very few sources of freshwater, so it's important to manage, right? South Africa is a water scarce country, and the reason for this is because we get almost only half of the world annual water annual rainfall. Okay, so the world global average annual rainfall is around 1,000 millimeters, but South Africa's annual rainfall sits around 464 millimeters. So that makes us a water scarce country. More reason why we should manage our freshwater sources. Then it is also true that population is growing, and the more people we are producing, the more need for water. So it is important to manage our water sources so that everyone can have water for life, and also that we can grow our food using all of this water. So it is further, let's look at the further need to manage our rivers for the following reasons. So that, like we said, so that everyone can have access to fresh water, so that river ecosystems can remain healthy, so that flooding can be controlled, all right? Flooding is controlled by the building of dams and weirs and all of that. All of that control flooding, right? So that water resources are conserved for the present and the future generations, and also so that river pollution like waste dumping are controlled. So when rivers are managed, it will control pollution of river and to control the dumping of waste into our rivers. And this pollution of our rivers brings about what we call eutrophication. Eutrophication is when a river has a lot of mineral content in it, okay, such that it allows for plants to grow on it, and these plants growing will snuff out the oxygen from the water, causing river or aquatic animal life to all be depleted. Okay, so it's called eutrophication, right? So the importance of our water sources. What are water sources good for? They're important for supply of clean water that are devoid of microorganisms like bacteria and viruses that will cause waterborne disease like cholera and typhoid. Okay, so we also have diseases such as bilharzia, right? And all of this come from microorganisms in water, or in short, dirty water, right? Bring about these diseases. So our other water sources are important because they provide water for many human activities like agriculture, like mining, like industry and manufacturing. Without water, all of this cannot happen. All right, so it's important. Our water sources are important for this reason. So fresh water sources are also a good supply of food because they directly supply fish. They are an alternative for the open seas and oceans. Okay, so our fresh water sources also supply fish and food for us. So they are used for recreational activities like tourism. Okay, people swim in them and all of that. So wildlife also depend on the water and vegetation in the riparian zone. And when we talk about the riparian zone, we're talking about area along a river. Those wetlands along a river are all referred to as the riparian zone. Now, the riparian zone are parts of the river that wildlife, birds, depend on the riparian zone for their food. And some of them even breed along. A lot of animals and very small organisms breed along the riparian zone. So it is important to conserve our water sources because of the riparian zone. Okay, and even this riparian zone even produce food for us as well. All right. So let's talk about, so when we talk about riparian zones, we're talking about wetlands, okay? So let's talk about the importance of wetlands further. So when we talk about wetlands, all wetlands include all the marshes, the swamps, and even the riparian zone along a river, okay? So they're important for the following reasons or in the following ways. Did you know that the wetlands reduce the acidity of water because they filter out all of the bacteria and all of and then thereby regulating the pH level of our rivers. Okay, remove the acidity and all of the microorganisms. That's what the wetlands are good for. So you see, they're important to be maintained. The wetlands also filter the sand and silt from reaching the river, okay, and the dams. So all of the silt and sand that would have been eroded from the land, the wetlands prevent all of those from reaching the rivers and preventing smooth water or stream flow. Okay, so they also serve as sponges that trap and store water. We talked about storage of water earlier on in the topic. Okay, so it is the wetlands that store all of the water that comes from or enters the wetland. Okay, so you see all of that, the wetlands store and they trap all of the water and store them and then gradually release them into the flowing stream. The reason for that is they have time to filter all of the impurities from the water that is coming from land. Okay, as a result of human activity, a lot of this water would have been polluted. Now the wetlands all filter all of that and then gradually releases it into the river stream. They also serve as a breeding habitat, okay, for many organisms. Okay, so a lot of organisms like worms and all of those things depend on the wetlands for their breeding. Okay, so that is very important. Let's look at how human activity impacts the drainage basins. All right, so a drainage basin collects precipitation and allows for infiltration, and then it also stores and purifies rainwater in the wetland and then channels the runoff into the streams. Okay, so all of this happen in a drainage basin. So human activities can impact a drainage basin in the following ways. So when we use water, it affects the volume and nature of flow in a river. Okay, so human activity also affects the land surfaces on which water flows into the river basin, right? So when we do a lot of mining and a lot of industrialization and it pollutes the land, and then rain falls and then there is surface runoff on this land, all of that water that is polluted as a result of human activity ends up in the river. Okay, so we affect the land through which surface runoff gets into the river. And then we affect the quality of water that goes underground, that infiltrates underground as well, by polluting the surface of runoff or the surface on which infiltration happens. Okay, and then all of that polluted water on the polluted ground will eventually find itself into the rivers or seep underground to form groundwater. So you see, human activity can impact the quality of water, the quality of river water, or the quality of underground water as well. Okay, so more human impact include the excessive removal of groundwater through boreholes. So the more boreholes we have, the more we are taking groundwater, and that is reducing the base flow that goes into the rivers underground. Okay, now that affects the level of flow in a river. Overgrazing also decreases water infiltration and therefore it inversely affects river flow. All right. So remember, we said that once vegetation cover is removed, it causes a lot of runoff. But we want vegetation so that vegetation, the roots of plants and vegetation, can hold water and prevent it from running off. And that water will seep in and infiltrate into the ground, causing an abundance of groundwater and also infiltrating into the water table, into the riverbed as base flow, increasing the flow of the rivers. But when we do not allow overgrazing to happen, that then impacts our river flows. Then runoff in agricultural areas contains salt. So where there's a lot of farming, you will find out that these agricultural areas bring a lot of salt. Where you have runoff on this agricultural land, it will wash all the salts that come from the fertilizer that has been used on those lands and all of the pesticides that have been used. And all of that is washed into the river, and that affects aquatic life. As a matter of fact, that brings about eutrophication. Eutrophication. We talked about this previously. All right. So then you have urban areas, human activity, where you have urban areas. Humans build urban areas and make all the surfaces concrete, thereby not allowing. Now, where you have concrete surfaces, there is little infiltration, and this impacts rivers. All of this water is supposed to flow into the river and then cause the flow of the river to be at the normal levels, all right? But then when we have a lot of concrete surfaces in the urban areas, there is so much water that flows into the river, causing an overflow of water into the river and even flooding the urban areas itself, all right? So all of that impacts the rivers, okay? So we have wetlands. Human activities cause wetlands to be used for crop plantation, okay? And then this will badly pollute, and or you have badly polluted sewage works, okay? So it's either we're using wetlands for crop plantation, okay, or we're using it for sewage works, and or for mines and for agriculture. All of this end up polluting the wetlands or the rivers. And then the removal of water for irrigation also changes the level of flow in a river. Now, I've got a diagram here to show you how human activity all impact on the river systems. All right, so all of this are the various ways in which human activities all impact on drainage basins. All right, so you can take time and study that. Now, that still on human impact on drainage basins, water transfer schemes as well. Remember, we humans pass water from rivers that have more volume or more discharge to rivers that have less discharge so that there is more water there. All of these water transfer schemes and dam constructions also alter the ecology of a river, all right, and they impact on the marine life of a river. Okay, so recreational activities around a riparian zone also disrupt the ecology and results in other forms of pollution. Okay, so when you have settlements springing up around riparian zones, so people building houses around riparian zones, this also disrupts the natural flow of rivers and cause the collapse of riverbanks in some cases, all right? So, because when you have houses built on riverbanks, it makes the soil there to become unstable. And so you could have mass movement along such slopes and riverbanks will collapse. So people introduce alien species also as plants and alien fish into our rivers as well. Now, when that happens, we know that alien plant species always need more water, all right, to survive. And the indigenous plant species do not need so much water, okay? So when these alien plant species come, it's been proven that they take up to about 10% of the flow in a river, and that's massive, all right? So altering the flow of a river. Or it could be that alien fish are introduced into rivers, and these do not augur well for our aquatic life in the indigenous aquatic ecology. So then you also have the constructing flood controls like artificial embankments to prevent water action. Also, all of this change the flow of rivers and prevent floodplain fertility. All right. So these are the various ways in which human activity impacts on water flow or on river flow, as well as the drainage basin as a whole. All right. So this is where we would leave it for today, and I'll see you again next time when we discover our world one lesson at a time. Bye bye.